The silent poet Amina sat by the window of her small room, gazing out at the bustling streets of her Ghanaian town. Her fingers danced on the pages of her notebook, each word carefully chosen, each line a reflection of her deepest thoughts. She was shy, introverted, a poet in a world that seldom understood her. At school, her classmates barely noticed her, except for one, Kwame, the popular and charismatic class president. Amina admired him from afar, too afraid to speak, but her heart poured out in her poems. One evening, after writing another poem about Kwame, Amina accidentally dropped the paper on the school grounds. The next morning, as she walked into school, her heart skipped a beat when she saw her poem pinned to the school bulletin board. She gasped. How did it get there? Was it a mistake? Or had someone found it and thought it was worthy of sharing? The sudden attention made her nervous, but it also sparked something inside her, a longing to be heard, to have her words matter.
The sight of her poem on the bulletin board sent waves of excitement and fear through Amina. Her classmates gathered around, reading the poem out loud, marveling at the beauty of the words. Whispers filled the air as they speculated about the mysterious poet. Amina's heart pounded as she overheard bits of conversation, some of them guessing who had written it. Could it be her? She dared not reveal her secret, but inside, she couldn't help but feel a mixture of pride and fear. Kwame, standing by the bulletin board, was curious too. He had always been popular, surrounded by friends, but the raw vulnerability of the poem intrigued him. His eyes scanned the crowd, wondering who had the courage to write something so beautiful yet so personal. Amina watched from a distance, her heart racing. She hadn't planned on anyone seeing her work, let alone Kwame. But there it was, her soul laid bare for the world to see. As the bell rang for class, she quickly walked away, her thoughts a whirlwind of emotions. The days that followed were filled with tension and confusion for Amina. The poem remained on the bulletin board for a whole week, with new ones appearing each day. Whoever was writing them had caught the attention of the entire school. Friends and strangers alike began whispering her name, speculating about the mysterious poet. Amina couldn't escape the curious stares, the pointed questions from her classmates. They wanted to know who she was, who the poet was. But Amina stayed quiet, too scared to reveal her secret. Meanwhile, Kwame's curiosity grew stronger. He had noticed Amina in the hallways, her head down, her eyes hidden behind thick glasses. She was always in the background, quiet and reserved. But now, her words spoke louder than any of the popular students. Kwame began to wonder if she could be the one behind the poems. Every day, he eagerly awaited the new poems on the bulletin board, captivated by the beauty of the words. He couldn't understand why someone so quiet could express such intense emotion, and it made him want to know her better. A whisper of doubt Amina's world shifted when the principal made an announcement over the school intercom. "We are all intrigued by the beautiful poetry appearing on the bulletin board," he said, his voice full of enthusiasm. "But I must remind everyone that the author should come forward and claim their work. We cannot allow this to continue without knowing the source." The room fell silent, and Amina felt her stomach twist in knots. Would someone discover her secret? Could she really reveal herself? As the days passed, the pressure weighed heavily on Amina. She felt exposed, vulnerable. Every glance in her direction felt like a spotlight shining on her. Her classmates had begun to make assumptions. Some said it was a popular girl looking for attention, while others believed it was a quiet student with a hidden talent. But no one suspected Amina. She had kept her secret well guarded, or so she thought. The longer the poems appeared, the more Amina questioned her decision to remain silent. Was it worth the risk? Would she find the courage to stand up and let her voice be heard?
Kwame, too, began to feel the pressure of the mysterious poems. His friends joked about him being the inspiration behind the verses, playfully teasing him every time a new poem was posted. But Kwame couldn't shake the feeling that there was something deeper behind the words, that something personal. The poem spoke of longing, of heartbreak, of dreams unspoken. And though they were beautiful, they felt like they were written for him, for someone who understood the struggles he faced, even though he was popular and had everything going for him. One afternoon, as Amina walked to the library, she ran into Kwame. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. He looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and something else, something she couldn't quite place. Amina's heart raced, and she quickly looked away, her face turning red. Kwame smiled, his gaze softening. "I've been reading your poems," he said quietly. "They're amazing." Amina's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't believe he was talking to her, acknowledging her words. For the first time, Amina felt a sense of possibility. Maybe this was the moment when she could finally speak her truth.
Amina's mind raced, her thoughts tangled in a web of excitement and fear. Kwame, the very person she admired from afar, was standing right in front of her, talking about her poems. Her voice felt trapped in her throat, but she managed a quiet response. "Thank you," she whispered, her face flushed with embarrassment. Kwame smiled again, his eyes soft and reassuring. "You should really consider sharing more of your work," he said, his tone gentle, yet with an edge of encouragement. Amina couldn't believe her ears. Was Kwame, the popular class president, really suggesting that she write more? For the rest of the day, Amina couldn't stop thinking about their conversation. His words had sparked something inside her, something she didn't know was there, a desire to be seen, to be heard. But still, she couldn't shake the nagging fear. What would her classmates think if they knew it was her? What if they mocked her for being so open, so vulnerable? The uncertainty hung heavy over her heart. Yet, a small voice inside her told her it was time to stop hiding. That evening, Amina sat at her desk, pen in hand, staring at a blank sheet of paper. The world outside seemed still, as if waiting for her next move. She began to write again, not about Kwame this time, but about herself, the girl who had hidden in the shadows for so long, afraid to speak her truth. Her words poured onto the page, each one a reflection of her journey, her pain, and her dreams. Amina knew she was no longer the same girl who had once hidden behind her notebook. She was finding her voice.
The following day, Amina's new poem appeared on the bulletin board. It was different from the others, more raw, more personal. It spoke of her dreams, her struggles, and her growing desire to be seen and loved. The moment it was posted, whispers filled the hallway. "Did you read that one? It's different. Who wrote it? It sounds so real." Amina's heart raced as she watched her classmates' reactions from a distance. For the first time, she felt like her words had power, like they could move people. But at the same time, a part of her wondered if she had shared too much. Kwame had been reading the new poem when he saw Amina standing by the bulletin board, her eyes cast downward. He knew it was her. There was something about the poem that felt like a part of her was written into every word. The raw emotion, the vulnerability, it all seemed to speak directly to him. And yet, the more he read, the more he found himself torn. Was it possible that someone so quiet, so unassuming, could feel these things so deeply? He needed to know more about the person behind the words. The bell rang, signaling the start of class, but Kwame couldn't shake the feeling that he was now part of something bigger than just school gossip. The poems had become a bridge, a connection between him and someone who had captured his attention in ways he hadn't expected. But did Amina feel the same way? Was this just a fleeting moment, or could it lead to something more? The days following Amina's confession to Kwame were a blur of emotions. She couldn't stop thinking about their conversation in the garden. It had been the first time she had spoken so openly to him, and it felt surreal. In the following days, Kwame would occasionally glance at her across the classroom, his eyes filled with a warmth she had never noticed before. He would sometimes smile, his gaze lingering just a moment longer than usual, making Amina's heart flutter. But despite the unspoken connection, things were still uncertain. Amina couldn't ignore the fact that her classmates were starting to notice the change in her. The whispers about her growing connection with Kwame spread like wildfire, and Amina became the subject of even more attention. Some girls, envious of the attention Kwame was giving her, shot her pointed glares in the hallways, while others were eager to know the details. Amina felt exposed and vulnerable again. What if they misunderstood her? What if this whole thing fell apart? Kwame, noticing the shift, began to step closer to her, not just in school, but in their casual conversations. They would meet in the library after school, exchanging words about their lives outside of school, their dreams, their struggles. In those moments, Amina found herself opening up in ways she never had before, sharing her poetry with him more freely. Kwame listened carefully, offering his thoughts and encouragement, and in return, Amina began to see a side of him she had never expected, a side that was kind, thoughtful, and genuine. But the more Amina grew closer to Kwame, the more she questioned if she was ready to take the next step. Could she truly let herself be vulnerable with him, knowing the risks of rejection? Her heart told her yes, but her mind was filled with doubts. She had never been the center of anyone's attention before, and now that she was, it felt overwhelming. As Amina's poems continued to appear on the bulletin board, the school's curiosity about the mysterious poet only deepened. Each poem became more intimate, more revealing, and with it, more students started guessing who the poet might be. Amina kept quiet, unsure if she was ready to reveal herself fully. The tension was growing, and the students were getting closer to guessing her identity. One afternoon, as Amina sat under a tree in the schoolyard, lost in thought, she saw Kwame approaching her. He smiled softly as he sat down beside her, the light breeze rustling through the trees. "Amina," he began, "the poems, they're amazing. They've really touched people." His voice was warm, and for the first time, Amina felt the weight of his admiration. "Thank you," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. But inside, she was feeling a mix of pride and fear. She hadn't expected to gain this much attention, but at the same time, it felt good to know that her words were being heard. Kwame's next words, however, made her heart race. "I think it's time you stopped hiding behind the poems, Amina," he said, his voice sincere. "Everyone's wondering who you are. It's only a matter of time before they figure it out. Why not tell them yourself?" Amina froze. Her heart skipped a beat. She wasn't ready for that kind of exposure. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted, her voice shaking slightly. "What if they judge me? What if they don't understand?" Kwame looked at her, his gaze soft and understanding. "They'll understand. You have a gift, Amina. It's something special. Don't hide it." Kwame's words stayed with Amina, and for the first time, she began to consider the possibility of revealing herself to the school. She had spent so long hiding, afraid of judgment, afraid of being vulnerable. But Kwame's belief in her gave her a sense of courage. Perhaps it was time to stop running from her fears and embrace who she truly was, both the poet and the person behind the words. That weekend, during the school's annual festival, Amina found herself standing near the stage, watching the performances and events unfold. She was lost in her thoughts, still debating whether she should take the next step and reveal herself. Kwame had encouraged her, but the idea of being in the spotlight, of having her peers see her in a new light, terrified her. Kwame appeared beside her, a friendly smile on his face. He had been busy with the festival preparations, but now, he seemed more relaxed. "Amina," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "It's your time. You've been hiding in the shadows for too long. Let them see you, really see you. You're not just a poet. You're so much more." Amina felt a lump form in her throat. Kwame's words were like a quiet push, urging her to take that leap of faith. Could she do it? Could she stand in front of her classmates and tell them that she was the poet they had admired from afar? The thought made her knees weak, but deep inside, a spark of determination began to flicker. The festival reached its climax, and Amina found herself standing in front of the entire school. It had been a challenge to get up on stage, but with Kwame's encouragement and the support of a few close friends, she had finally decided to take the plunge. She was going to read one of her poems aloud for the first time, to share her heart with everyone in the crowd. Her hands shook as she gripped the paper, but she took a deep breath and began to speak. Her voice trembled at first, but as she continued, the words flowed more easily. She read a poem she had written about love, longing, and the fear of being seen. The crowd fell silent, captivated by the emotion in her voice. As she finished, there was a brief silence before the audience erupted into applause. Amina stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. She had bared her soul to them, and now, she was vulnerable in a way she had never been before. But the applause was real, warm, and filled with admiration. When she finally looked up, she saw Kwame standing at the edge of the crowd, his smile wide and proud. In that moment, Amina realized that she had taken the first step into a new chapter of her life. She wasn't just a poet anymore, she was a person who had found her voice. In the days following Amina's brave performance, the school's atmosphere shifted. Her peers, once curious and hesitant, now looked at her with newfound respect. The whispers that had once been about her secret identity turned into conversations of admiration. Some students even approached her, asking about her poems and expressing how much her words had touched them. Amina couldn't believe the change. What had once been her greatest fear, being seen, had now become a source of strength. She felt lighter, freer, as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. Kwame, too, seemed to stand a little closer to her, offering quiet encouragement and support. The connection between them was undeniable, and Amina felt her feelings for him deepening with every passing day. However, not everyone was pleased with Amina's new attention. Some of her classmates, especially the popular girls, couldn't hide their jealousy. They had once been the center of attention, but now, it seemed like all eyes were on Amina. The tension was palpable, and Amina could feel the undercurrents of resentment bubbling beneath the surface. It made her wonder if her newfound confidence was worth the cost.
As the days passed, Amina found herself at the center of a whirlwind of attention. Her peers, who had once ignored her or viewed her as invisible, were now all too eager to engage with her. At first, it felt like a dream. People were coming to her for advice, complimenting her poems, and asking her to read more of her work. But the attention came with a price. Some of the girls who had once been her friends began to distance themselves. They shot her cold glances in the hallways, muttered under their breaths when she passed by. Amina could feel the shift, and it stung. She had never been the type of girl to crave popularity, but now, with the spotlight on her, the dynamics of her friendships were changing in ways she hadn't anticipated. Kwame noticed the tension too. He would often sit with Amina during lunch, quietly offering her reassurance when she looked troubled. "You're doing great, Amina," he would say, his voice warm and comforting. "You've stepped into your light. Don't let anyone dim it." But as much as Kwame's words reassured her, Amina couldn't shake the nagging feeling that things were starting to unravel. She didn't know who her real friends were anymore, and the constant pressure to live up to everyone's expectations made her feel like she was losing herself. What was she supposed to do with all this attention? Amina's popularity continued to grow, but it came with a shadow. The whispers in the hallways had become more venomous, and some students had started to talk behind her back, saying things like, "She's acting like she's the queen of the school now," or "I bet she's just in it for the attention." The more Amina tried to ignore the rumors, the louder they seemed to get. The most hurtful part was that some of these comments were coming from people she had once considered friends. Her best friend, Gloria, who had always been supportive, had begun avoiding her. They used to stay up late talking about their dreams, but now Gloria barely spoke to her. Amina had tried reaching out, but the distance between them seemed to grow each day. One afternoon, Amina sat in the courtyard, her notebook open in front of her but her mind elsewhere. She had been working on a new poem, but the words just wouldn't come. The pressure was too much, and she couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of isolation. Kwame found her sitting alone, and his face softened when he saw the sadness in her eyes. "Hey, Amina," he said softly, sitting beside her. "What's wrong? You seem distant lately." Amina took a deep breath, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. It's just, everything has changed so quickly. I don't know who to trust anymore. People have started treating me differently. Some are congratulating me, others are, well, not so kind. Kwame's expression grew serious. You can't control how others react to your success, Amina. You've done nothing wrong. But sometimes, people aren't ready for the changes you bring, and that's something you'll have to navigate. What matters is that you stay true to yourself. Amina nodded, but her heart felt heavy. It was becoming harder to stay true to herself when everything around her was changing so quickly. The spotlight that had once felt like a dream now felt like a burden, and she wasn't sure if she could carry it much longer. The next few days were difficult for Amina. She had always been someone who kept her thoughts to herself, hiding behind her poems, but now that her words were out there, she couldn't escape the constant scrutiny. Her classmates' reactions ranged from admiration to jealousy, and even the ones who had been supportive now seemed to expect more from her. They wanted her to be perfect, to always have something meaningful to say, to never show any weakness. One afternoon, Amina sat by herself in the school garden, watching the other students interact with one another. Kwame had been busy with class president duties, and she hadn't seen him all day. She felt alone, unsure of who she could turn to. The weight of her new reality began to feel suffocating. It was then that Gloria approached, her face unreadable. Amina stood up quickly, relieved to see her best friend, but the coldness in Gloria's eyes made her hesitate. "Hey," Amina said softly, trying to bridge the gap that had formed between them. "I've been trying to reach you. Why haven't we talked lately?" Gloria sighed, with her arms crossed. "Amina, I don't know what to say. You've changed. You're not the same person I used to talk to. Now, it's all about your poems and the attention. It feels like you don't have time for anyone else anymore." Amina's heart sank. She hadn't realized how much her success had affected their friendship. "Gloria, that's not it at all," Amina said urgently. "I'm still the same person. Everything is moving so fast. I don't know how to keep up with it all." Gloria shook her head. "Maybe you don't want to keep up with it all. Maybe you just want to be the poet, not the person behind the poems. But that's not who you were before. And it's hard for me to see you change into someone else." Amina opened her mouth to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. She didn't know what to say to make things right. She felt like she was losing everyone, her best friend, her sense of self, and even her connection with Kwame, who had been the only person who truly seemed to understand her. The doubt that had been lurking at the back of her mind now felt impossible to ignore. Had she made a mistake by letting her poems be seen? Had she lost herself in the process? In the days following her confrontation with Gloria, Amina felt like she was teetering on the edge of something she couldn't control. The pressure was overwhelming, then the spotlight that had once felt like a gift now felt like a curse. She tried to write, but the words wouldn't come. Her notebook, once a safe haven, now felt like a burden, filled with expectations and judgment. Kwame noticed the shift in her, then one afternoon, he found her sitting alone in the library, staring blankly at her notebook. He pulled up a chair and sat beside her. "Amina," he said softly, "you've been quiet lately. What's going on?" Amina sighed deeply, her shoulders slumping. "I don't know, Kwame. I thought I wanted this, the attention, the recognition, the connection. But now, it's just too much. I feel like I'm losing myself in it." Kwame's expression softened, and he placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "It's okay to feel lost. You've been through a lot in a short amount of time. But you don't have to do this alone. You don't have to carry the weight of everyone's expectations. Just remember why you started writing in the first place, because it was something that mattered to you, not anyone else." You're allowed to be human, Amina. You're allowed to have doubts. But you don't have to let them define you. Amina looked up at Kwame, his words sinking in. Maybe it was time to take a step back, to find herself again before she lost everything she cared about. It wasn't about pleasing others or living up to their expectations, it was about staying true to herself. And with Kwame by her side, she realized she didn't have to face this alone.
The days that followed were filled with reflection for Amina. She had spent so much time worrying about the opinions of others, trying to live up to expectations that were never truly hers to meet. As Kwame had said, she needed to return to the root of why she wrote, to express herself, not to gain approval. She began to understand that her poems were her voice, her way of connecting with the world, but that connection didn't have to come at the cost of her peace. One evening, after a long day of classes, Amina sat under the large mango tree in the school courtyard with her notebook. The air was warm, and the distant chatter of students faded as she focused on her thoughts. Her pen hovered over the page, unsure of what to write at first. But then, as she began to write, the words came flooding back, the ones she had once written for herself, not for anyone else. The poem she wrote that evening was different. It wasn't about love or longing, it was about self-discovery, about finding strength in vulnerability. Amina poured her heart into the lines, each word reminding her of who she was before the fame, before the pressure, and before the spotlight. She realized that her journey was not about pleasing others, but about reclaiming her own sense of purpose. The next day, Amina decided to share the poem with her classmates, not for applause or admiration, but because it was a part of her. She walked up to the bulletin board during lunch and pinned it up, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't care about the judgment anymore. She just wanted to be heard. Amina's new poem, The Strength in Silence, was unlike anything she had written before. When it appeared on the school's bulletin board the following morning, students paused to read the raw honesty that poured from the words. The poem was vulnerable, yet empowering, and it spoke to something deep inside everyone who read it. It was a reflection of Amina's own struggle, but it resonated with the struggles of those around her. As students read the poem, whispers began to spread. Some were moved by the words, others were curious, and a few even approached Amina to thank her for sharing such a personal part of herself. It was the first time that Amina felt truly seen, not as the popular poet or the girl who wrote for attention, but as a person whose words mattered because they were real. Kwame, too, noticed the impact of her poem. He found her sitting under the mango tree again, a contented smile on her face as she gazed at the schoolyard. Amina, he said softly, that poem, it's incredible. I think it's your best one yet. Amina smiled shyly, her heart full. Thank you, Kwame. I wrote it for myself this time. Not for anyone else. I think I finally found my voice. Kwame sat beside her, his expression warm. You've always had it, Amina. But I'm glad you're starting to believe it too. Despite her renewed sense of purpose, Amina knew that not everything would be easy. The tension between her and Gloria still lingered, and it hurt more than she had anticipated. She missed the friendship they once had, the late-night talks, the shared dreams, and the unspoken bond that had always been there. But now, it felt as though a wall had been built between them, and Amina didn't know how to break it down. One afternoon, Amina sat at their usual lunch table, but Gloria didn't show up. Her absence was palpable, and the emptiness at the table made Amina feel like a part of her had been lost. She missed her friend, but she also knew that she couldn't pretend everything was okay when it wasn't. Later that day, Amina found Gloria standing by the lockers, staring at the floor. Her heart ached, and she approached slowly, unsure of how to start the conversation. Gloria, she began, her voice tentative. Can we talk? Gloria didn't look up at first but nodded. I don't know what to say, Amina. You've changed. And I guess I didn't expect it to be so hard to watch. Amina's heart sank, but she steadied herself. I haven't changed, Gloria. I'm still the same person, the same Amina. I got caught up in everything. I didn't mean to push you away. Gloria finally looked up, her eyes soft but still filled with sadness. I know, Amina. But it feels like you've forgotten who we are, who we were. You've become this different person, and I'm not sure how to fit into that anymore. Amina reached out, her voice trembling. I haven't forgotten you. I could never forget you. You're my best friend, Gloria. I've just been scared. Scared of losing myself, scared of losing you. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Gloria sighed deeply. Maybe I've been scared too. Scared of what you've become, scared of what I might become if I don't keep up. But I miss you, Amina. I miss the way things used to be. Amina smiled, a tear escaping her eye. I miss you too, Gloria. And I don't want to lose you. Maybe we've both been changing, but I think we can figure this out. We just have to be honest with each other. The two of them stood there, silent for a moment, before Gloria finally pulled Amina into a hug. I'm glad you found your voice, Amina. I'm just trying to find mine too. As Amina and Gloria began to rebuild their friendship, the weight of her emotional journey felt lighter. Her connection with Kwame, too, continued to deepen. He had always been there, supporting her, encouraging her to be herself, and now, Amina felt more ready than ever to open her heart to him. One evening, after the school's weekly study session, Amina and Kwame walked home together, the evening air cool and crisp. The streets were quiet, and the stars twinkled overhead. Amina, still feeling the thrill of reconnecting with Gloria, felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. Kwame, as if sensing her mood, smiled at her. You seem different, Amina. You look happy. I am, she said, her heart light. I think I'm finally learning how to just be me. No pretenses. No expectations. Just Amina. Kwame stopped walking, turning to face her. His eyes were gentle, but there was a seriousness in his gaze. Amina, I want you to know something, he said softly. You've always been enough, just as you are. And I don't just mean in your poems. I mean as a person. I think I've known it for a while, but I needed to tell you now. Amina's heart skipped a beat. Her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. But then she smiled, the warmth in her chest radiating outward. I think I've always known too. In that moment, standing under the stars, Amina realized that she had found her voice, her truth, and maybe, just maybe, she had found the love she had always longed for too.
The next few weeks passed in a gentle rhythm. Amina and Kwame continued to grow closer, sharing moments of laughter and quiet understanding that made Amina feel more alive than ever. She was no longer the shy, reserved girl who hid behind her notebooks. She was someone who stood tall, proud of who she was and what she had accomplished. But even in the midst of her personal growth, there were whispers she couldn't escape. One day, while walking to class, Amina overheard a conversation between two students, laughing as they talked about her. Did you hear? Amina's falling for Kwame. She's the talk of the school now. But I bet she's just another girl after the popular guy, one of them snickered. Amina froze in place, her stomach tightening. She couldn't understand why the students seemed to enjoy undermining her happiness. They didn't know her, didn't know what she had fought through to get to this point. Why was her relationship with Kwame seen as a game or a statement about her worth? It was difficult for Amina to shake the feeling that no matter how much she tried to change, there would always be someone waiting to tear her down. But when she met Kwame after school, she found comfort in his smile, in the way his presence grounded her. He sensed the unease in her eyes. Is everything okay? Kwame asked, his voice gentle but concerned. Amina hesitated. She didn't want to burden him with the weight of the rumors, but the words spilled out anyway. There are people talking, Kwame. They don't think I'm good enough for you. They think this, whatever this is between us, is just a phase, that I'm not serious. Kwame's eyes darkened with frustration, but his voice remained calm. Let them talk, Amina. People will always have opinions, and sometimes they won't understand what's real. But I know what's real between us. And that's all that matters. Amina took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of his words settle in her chest. In that moment, she realized that it didn't matter what others thought, what mattered was the love and respect they shared. As the school year continued, the pressure from the outside world didn't ease. Amina's relationship with Gloria remained a source of tension. Though they had made amends, there was an unspoken distance between them that neither could fully bridge. Gloria was still hurt by the changes in Amina, and Amina was struggling to balance her growing relationship with Kwame with her desire to keep her old friendships intact. One afternoon, as Amina and Gloria sat together in the school courtyard, Amina could sense the unease. Gloria had been distant, distracted, and when she spoke, her tone was sharp. "I just don't get it, Amina," Gloria said, her voice tinged with bitterness. "You're so different now. You used to be the one who cared about us, about the things that mattered. But now it's all about your poems, your attention, and him." She gestured vaguely, referring to Kwame. "I can't recognize the person you've become." Amina felt a pang of guilt, but she tried to stay calm. "I haven't changed, Gloria. I'm still the same person. She stopped, trying to find the right words. "I just need to figure things out. I'm trying to be true to myself." Gloria's face hardened. "Well, I guess you figured that out without me. I can't be part of whatever this is. I don't want to be someone who's just there when it's convenient for you." The words hit Amina like a punch to the gut. Gloria had always been her closest friend, and now it seemed like their bond was unraveling. She had never wanted to hurt Gloria, but it felt like no matter what she did, she couldn't fix the rift between them. "I'm sorry, Gloria," Amina said quietly, feeling the weight of the words. "I never wanted to hurt you. I need to find my way. I hope you can understand that." Gloria didn't reply. She stood up abruptly, her eyes filled with unshed tears, and walked away. Amina watched her go, her heart breaking for the friendship that seemed to be slipping through her fingers. Amina spent the next few days lost in her thoughts, torn between the joy she had found with Kwame and the pain of losing her best friend. She tried to focus on her studies, but every time she passed by Gloria in the hallways, the hurt between them felt palpable. It seemed like every step forward with Kwame was followed by a step back with Gloria, and the constant tension left Amina feeling emotionally drained. She met with Kwame one evening after school, hoping that his presence would help calm her racing thoughts. As they sat together on the steps outside the school building, Amina let out a deep sigh. "I don't know what to do, Kwame," she admitted, her voice cracking slightly. "I'm losing Gloria, and I don't know how to fix it. We used to be inseparable, but now it feels like I'm losing her over something I can't control." Kwame listened patiently, his hand gently resting on hers. "I know you're hurting, Amina. But sometimes, the people we care about don't understand the changes we go through. They might feel left behind or threatened, but that doesn't mean they'll be gone forever. Maybe Gloria just needs time to see that you're still the same person." Amina looked at him, the tears she had been holding back finally slipping down her cheeks. "I don't want to lose her, Kwame. She's my best friend. I can't do this without her." Kwame pulled her into a comforting embrace. "You don't have to do it alone, Amina. I'm here for you, no matter what. And so is your voice, don't let it be drowned out by fear or by anyone's expectations." Amina clung to him for a long moment, grateful for his support. She didn't have all the answers, but in that moment, she realized that she wasn't alone. She had people who cared for her, and she would fight to keep those relationships, even if it meant facing the most difficult challenges yet. Amina's mind continued to churn with doubts and emotions, but she knew she had to make a choice. She couldn't keep living in the shadow of other people's expectations. She couldn't keep trying to be everything to everyone. She had to find her own path, her own peace. The turning point came unexpectedly, during a school event. Amina had been asked to read one of her poems in front of the entire school, a chance to showcase her talent. She stood at the podium, her heart racing, her hands trembling. The room was silent as she began to speak, her voice steady but soft at first. And then, as she read the poem, something shifted inside her. The words that had once been difficult to express now flowed freely. She was no longer hiding behind the fear of judgment, no longer trying to please others. She was speaking for herself, raw, unfiltered, and free. When she finished, the room was still. But then, a slow clap began, followed by a wave of applause. Amina felt a rush of emotion, a mix of relief and pride. She had finally found her place, her voice. And for the first time in a long while, she felt truly at peace.
The days after Amina's powerful reading passed in a blur. She couldn't stop thinking about the moment she had stood in front of her peers and spoken her truth. It was as if a weight had been lifted, and the world felt just a little bit lighter. Yet, in the back of her mind, she knew the rift with Gloria wasn't over. Her heart ached every time she saw her friend, still distant, still hurt. One afternoon, as Amina walked through the schoolyard, she saw Gloria sitting by herself on a bench, staring into the distance. Her heart pounded. This was her chance to reach out, to make things right. Amina sat beside Gloria quietly, not saying anything at first. Gloria didn't acknowledge her presence, but Amina could see the tension in her posture. Finally, Amina spoke, her voice soft but steady. "I miss you, Gloria. I've missed you for so long, and I know I hurt you. But I never wanted to. I was just trying to figure things out, and in the process, I lost you." Gloria didn't look at her but remained silent for a moment. Then, finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but laced with emotion. "I missed you too, Amina. But it's hard, you know. I feel like I don't recognize the person you've become. You've changed, and I don't know where I fit in anymore." Amina's heart sank, but she took a deep breath, determined to make Gloria understand. "I haven't changed in the ways that matter. I'm still the same person I was when we were inseparable. I just needed to grow, to find my own voice. And now I want you to be a part of that, Gloria. I want us to be part of each other's lives again. Can we try?" Gloria finally turned to face her, her eyes red but soft. "I don't know, Amina. But I'm willing to try. If you really want to find a way back to what we had, then I'll try too." They sat in silence for a while, the air between them lighter than it had been in weeks. Slowly, they began to rebuild the friendship that had once been unbreakable. As Amina and Gloria worked on healing their friendship, the challenges didn't stop. It was as if life was testing them both, testing how far they were willing to go for each other, testing how strong their bond really was. They fought, they cried, and they laughed, but with every moment of pain, there came a moment of growth. Amina found herself walking a fine line between her relationship with Kwame, her poetry, and her deepening connection with Gloria. As her relationship with Kwame blossomed, she could feel the weight of balancing everything she cared about pulling at her. Sometimes it felt like there weren't enough hours in the day to give everyone the attention they deserved. One afternoon, as Amina sat alone in the library, working on a new poem, she was interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Kwame. "I've been looking for you," he said with a smile, walking in and taking a seat next to her. "I wanted to talk. I know things are changing for you, and I want to make sure you're okay." Amina smiled at him, grateful for his understanding. "I'm okay. Just trying to keep everything together. It's a lot to juggle." Kwame's expression softened. "You don't have to do it all at once, Amina. You've been carrying a lot, and I want you to know I'm here to help, to be a part of it. But I also want you to remember that you don't have to be everything to everyone. Your happiness comes first." Amina looked at him, her heart full. She was so grateful for him, for his patience and support. I know. I just don't want to disappoint anyone. But I'm trying to figure it out, piece by piece. Kwame reached out, taking her hand gently. I believe in you, Amina. You'll figure it out. But remember, it's okay to take it slow. I'm here for you every step of the way. In that moment, Amina felt more at ease than she had in a long time. She didn't have to rush. She didn't have to have all the answers. She just had to keep going, one step at a time. As Amina continued to gain confidence in her voice and her poetry, something else started to stir, an uncomfortable feeling of guilt. The more she became involved in her relationship with Kwame, the more the other students' views of her started to change. There were whispers behind her back, and some of the students who had once admired her now saw her as just another girl caught up in the drama of high school popularity. One afternoon, as Amina sat with Kwame in the school courtyard, a group of students approached, looking at her with knowing eyes. They were the popular crowd, the ones who had always had something to say about Amina's newfound attention. "You're really into Kwame now, huh?" one of the girls sneered. "You've got his attention, but don't think you're the only one fighting for it." Amina's stomach twisted. She had never been one for drama, but these words stung. She could see the judgment in their eyes, and it made her question everything. Was she just another girl to them? Another face that Kwame would grow tired of? Kwame noticed the change in her demeanor and stood up, stepping closer to her. "Amina doesn't have to explain herself to anyone," he said, his voice steady and firm. "She's her own person, and she doesn't need anyone's approval to be happy. We don't owe you an explanation." The students paused, taken aback by Kwame's words. For a moment, there was an uncomfortable silence before they slowly walked away, muttering among themselves. Amina turned to Kwame, her heart racing. "Thank you. I didn't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, Amina," he said softly, "because you've already shown everyone who you are. They just need to catch up." In that moment, Amina realized something important. No matter what the world thought, she knew her truth. And she had the strength to stand by it. The tension between Amina and the world didn't just dissolve overnight. There were still moments of doubt, moments when the pressure of expectations weighed heavily on her shoulders. But with each passing day, Amina grew more and more confident in her ability to navigate the world on her own terms. She continued to write, pouring her heart into every poem, and she didn't let the opinions of others affect her as much. When the next school event came around, Amina was asked to present her poetry in front of the entire school once more. But this time, she didn't hesitate. She didn't feel the need to prove anything to anyone. As she stood at the podium, facing the sea of faces in the audience, she smiled to herself. This wasn't about impressing anyone, it was about sharing a piece of herself, raw and true. And for the first time, Amina felt completely free. She read her poem with a confidence she hadn't known she had. As the final words left her lips, the room erupted in applause. But more importantly, Amina felt something shift inside her. She no longer needed anyone's approval to feel validated. She was enough, just as she was. And in that moment, she realized she had broken free. As the months passed, Amina's relationship with Kwame deepened, but so did the challenges. Their bond was undeniable, but the pressures of being a high school couple came with their own set of hurdles. The whispers about their relationship never stopped, and the more popular they became as a couple, the more difficult it became to ignore the rumors and judgments from their peers. Amina was still struggling with the idea that some people saw her relationship with Kwame as something fleeting, something that wouldn't last. One evening, as they sat together on the school bleachers, Kwame could tell something was bothering Amina. She was distant, lost in thought, her eyes scanning the horizon. "Amina," Kwame said softly, his voice filled with concern. "What's on your mind?" She hesitated before speaking, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you ever feel like people expect us to fail? That maybe we're just another high school romance destined to burn out?" Kwame was quiet for a moment, considering her words. Then he took her hand gently. "People will always talk, Amina. It's what they do. But we are not them. We are not some story to be told by others. What we have is ours, and no one can take that away. Amina looked at him, her heart swelling with affection. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that their love could survive whatever came their way. "You're right," she said softly. "But it's hard sometimes, you know. I don't want to disappoint you. I don't want to let the pressure of everyone else's opinions tear us apart." Kwame leaned in and kissed her forehead. "You won't disappoint me. And we won't let anyone else define what we have. We get to choose our own story." Amina smiled, feeling the warmth of his words settle in her chest. She realized that love wasn't about avoiding challenges, it was about facing them together, with trust and understanding. As the school year drew to a close, Amina was faced with a new set of pressures. Her poetry had gained more attention, and she was asked